The world we live in is a familiar world, but the life we can see is not the only life around us. Life also exists on a much smaller scale in the waters of our lakes and ponds. Water like this, just taken from a pond, contains plants and animals so small that we'll look for them in a single drop of water. The drop is a miniature world, a world that can be entered only through the microscope, which will magnify our drop many times. We can get an idea of what this means from this needle. In our everyday world, a needle is very small. But when we put it into our drop of water under the microscope, it looks immense. Here is a world in which darting animals are smaller than a needlepoint. This is the miniature world of the microscope, showing life in its simplest forms. These tiny living plants and animals carry on every one of the fundamental processes of life. Like all living things, each must obtain food to produce growth and energy. Each moves, either from place to place or within itself. Reacts or responds to changes in surrounding conditions, and reproduces its own kind. In pond water, much animal life depends on simple plants for food. These single-celled desmids and diatoms are common green algae. With the aid of sunlight and a green substance called chlorophyll, these plants make their own food from minerals. Waternet is another green algae, which is an abundant food supply for pond life. Amoeba, the simplest one-celled animal, has no definite shape. It is a tiny bit of jelly-like material called protoplasm. The moving living mass is held together by an outside layer of denser protoplasm. A contractile vacuole, looking like a white bubble, acts as a pump to collect and expel waste liquids. Food is absorbed directly into the protoplasm. On the left, a tiny animal is being entrapped by two of the pseudopods, or false feet of the amoeba. The color of an amoeba varies, depending much upon its last meal. The green stem in the lower right is Spirogyra, a common water plant. Vampirella, a species of amoeba, feeds on Spirogyra. With needle-like pseudopods, Vampirella breaks open the Spirogyra cells and extracts the green ribbons of chlorophyll. Often strands of Spirogyra are linked by small bridges of protoplasm. This is conjugation, the simplest type of sexual reproduction. The protoplasm from two cells unites to form a new cell. The round object surrounded by Spirogyra is Volvox. Volvox, like Spirogyra, has chlorophyll, but like amoeba or any typical animal, it moves about. Volvox is really a colony of thousands of single-celled plant animals called protists. Each cell has two small whips of protoplasm, or flagella, which lash about, rolling the colony over and over. More efficient movement is carried on by Paramecium, the slipper animal. A cell membrane gives Paramecium a definite shape. The membrane is covered with cilia, tiny hair-like projections. Moving rapidly, the cilia literally row the streamlined animal through the water. Paramecium feeds on the tiniest of plants, which are swept in by extra strong cilia lining the mouth groove. Paramecium can reproduce sexually by conjugation, or by fission, which is simply splitting in two. Other simple animals reproduce by fission. Like Paramecium, these bell animals are one-celled ciliates, but they live attached to plants and stones and do not use the cilia for locomotion. Their cilia are specialized for feeding. They can be seen as a ring around the open end of the bell-shaped body. The rapid beat of the cilia creates a whirlpool which sucks food particles into the gullet or throat. Vorticella is named for this characteristic whirlpool or vortex. The body is on an elastic stalk which anchors the animal to plants or stones in its feeding ground. The slightest disturbance causes a reaction like a coiled spring. A giant of the microscopic world is Stentor, the trumpet animal. Its single cell may stretch out to 1/10 of an inch. Like Paramecium, its body is covered with small cilia, and like the bell animals, its mouth is encircled by large cilia. In Stentor, the cilia around the mouth are fused in groups called membranelles. Actual grains of pigment in the body will give color to the various species of Stentors: brown, green, or blue. A Stentor looks like a deep-sea monster as it streamlines its shape for swimming. Notice how the strong membranelles are used as propellers as it swims off. In its structure and adaptability, Stentor is one of the most complex single-celled animals. But single-celled plants and animals are not all the forms that we might find in our drop of pond water. Some are composed of many cells and are quite specialized. One of these is Hydra, whose sac-like body of 2 layers of cells makes it a relative of the jellyfishes and corals. Hydra is a meat eater, lurking like an octopus with outspread tentacles until some small animal brushes against them. Then the Hydra paralyzes the prey with a shower of poisonous threads. The animal is then seized by the Hydra's tentacles and transferred to its mouth. Hydras may reproduce sexually by developing specialized cells, which form eggs or sperms. Usually they reproduce by budding. This process, like fission, requires only one parent. Either a male or a female Hydra can grow a bud, which shares the nourishment of the parent's body. Nerve cells in both parent and bud coordinate their muscular reaction until the bud breaks off. The swift little animal feeding around the Volvox colony is a rotifer, another many-celled form of microscopic life. The free-swimming rotifers sometimes attach themselves temporarily to a feeding spot. And some species of rotifer remain permanently attached to a plant or stone or tiny object. Rotifers have a tube-like digestive system with a mouth and anus for one-way traffic of food. For chewing, a rotifer has a strongly muscled food chopper called a mastex in its throat. The circle of cilia crowning the head sweep bits of food into the mastex. Other species of rotifer are even more specialized. This type builds itself a protective tube by cementing together tiny bits of debris, while this species lives in colonies. The beautiful lobes with their moving cilia seem to revolve, giving us the name rotifer, which means wheelbearer. These living forms are much more complex than the simple amoeba, but all of them must meet the basic requirements of life: moving, reacting, obtaining food, and reproducing. These are the same requirements needed by higher forms of life. Even our own requirements for living are no different than those we see in the teeming life in a drop of water.